Hello everyone, I'm Jocelyn from Nation Church. Now many situations in life require us to be ready. We get ready for the day, whether it be school or work, and that involves us being organized and prepared. Now thanks to COVID finally easing up around the world, I recently got to travel overseas, and that meant that I had to catch a flight. So of course before catching a flight, I had to pack my bags, get my documents ready, and make my way to the airport. Now who here likes to procrastinate? I, for one, procrastinate all the time. And so I did this with little time to spare. And I quickly got all my bags together and got my stuff together, and then made my way to the airport. But unfortunately, sometimes life likes to throw us with unexpected circumstances that lead to a little bit of inconvenience. So when I got to the airport, I found out that the check-in lines were super long, and some of these check-in machines weren't even working. The baggage drop-off system was even frozen. Now because I did all this last minute, I almost missed my flight. But fortunately, with some kind help from the ground staff, I was still able to catch my flight. So today's message is, how ready are you? I'm going to be talking about the return of Jesus, and I'm going to unpack the parable of the 10 virgins. Now reading from Matthew 25, 1-13. At the time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Now these virgins that were mentioned here were actually bridesmaids. Now back in the ancient Jewish weddings, the father of the groom would go to the bride's house and negotiate the bride's dowry. Once the negotiations were settled, the bridegroom would come and fetch his bride and proceed through the streets with the whole wedding party back to the groom's parents' house, where the celebrations would be completed. So the setting of the parable is actually at the bride's house, where these girls were waiting for the groom to appear so that they could join in the procession of taking the bride back to the groom's house for the wedding banquet. Now they have no idea when the bridegroom is going to arrive. And these weddings normally take place towards the evening. Perhaps the negotiations took a little bit longer than they needed to, and they need the lamps as an essential part of the celebration. Now these lamps that were referred to were probably not actually lamps, but torches that need oil to be lit. Now 5 of them were foolish and 5 of them were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps but did not take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oil in jars with their lamps. Now, a lot of the times, the bridegrooms were delayed, and the announcement of them coming would be repeated until they arrived. Now, in some translations of these verses, it actually says extra oil. Because the bridegroom was considerably late, their lamps would not have lasted unless they had an extra reserve of oil. Now, you might be wondering, what's with the number 5? Now, these numbers represented here do not imply that only half the people would receive salvation. The numbers here are to show that there is a clear distinction between the two groups, the wise and the foolish. Now, wisdom consists of those that are prepared, and foolishness in those that lacked preparation for the unexpected situations that may arise. Now, in this case, the bridesmaids were not ready for the delay of the bridegroom and the rest of the wedding festivities. So this comes to the first point I want to make. There is always a choice to be made. To be wise or to be foolish. To be prepared or unprepared. On my return flight, I chose to be wise. I packed my bags early, I checked in early, and even had time to spare to enjoy the rest of my day. Now, by being prepared, it gave me room for setbacks. I was ready and waiting at the boarding gate when my flight arrived. Verse 5. The groom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. In the previous 2 parables, the figure representing Christ comes at a surprising time or earlier than expected. But in this parable, the bridegroom was delayed. Jesus is covering all possibilities, and us as Christians really should stop pretending like we know when he's going to return. The second point this parable teaches us is that we do not know when Christ will return. They all fell asleep, so in this parable, Jesus is not criticizing the bridesmaids for sleeping, but whether they were prepared or not. Every one of us experiences the same potential inconvenient circumstances. We all have our own problems in life to deal with. We all have our own lives to live. And one day we all have to give an account before the King of Kings. So at the airport, every one of us had to deal with the same crazy situation at the airport. But some of them were earlier and they were prepared. They knew that there would be unexpected things. Now we all somehow made the flight because we knew what time our flight was coming. But unfortunately for Jesus' return, we have no idea when he's going to come back. Verse 6. At midnight the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." Now the wise ones that had extra oil did not have enough for everyone. Trying to share the oil would have left too little for them and ruined the wedding party. Now for the wise ones to say no, it wasn't out of selfishness or unkindness, it was out of common sense. If all the torches went out, the wedding procession would have been a disaster, and they would need that sufficient oil to last the whole procession to the groom's house. This part of the story actually teaches us something quite significant. The third point that I want to make is that one's faith cannot be shared or transferred to another. Some things just cannot be shared. We cannot share the obedience to principles that the Bible teaches us. We cannot share the attitudes and peace of mind for righteous living. Your obedience and your daily faithfulness to reading the Word, spending time in prayer and in His presence cannot be shared at the end of our lives. The salvation of one person cannot be shared or transferred like the oil in the passage to another. But while they were on the way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the others also came. "Lord, Lord," they said, "open the door for us." But he said, "Truly I tell you, I do not know you." Now by the time the foolish ones returned with their extra oil, the wedding party was already inside and they were denied and excluded from the wedding feast. It was an honor back in the day for the girls to be a bridesmaid, so to be excluded from the wedding feast must have been a humiliating and mortifying experience for them. Now normally, late wedding guests would just be publicly shamed, but allowed back into the marriage festivities. But in this parable, Jesus is trying to teach us a spiritual lesson, and he is insisting that it will be too late to repent when he has returned. And of course, no bridegroom would ever deny knowing some of the bridesmaids. But for Jesus to say, "I don't know you," he is suggesting that there are no genuine relationships for these so-called disciples. Now, as you can see from what's happened in this parable, the fourth thing I want you to take away from it is that wisdom allows you to reap the rewards of being prepared. Foolishness, on the other hand, will result in consequences. Now, in this life, we can say better late than never. If I'd really missed my flight at the airport, I could have just bought another ticket and caught the next flight. But in regards to Jesus' return, we cannot use that same attitude. Jesus makes it clear that once he has returned, it will be too late. So therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day or hour. Now this comes to the end of the parable. Let's do a recap of the things that we've learned so far. First, there is always a choice to be made, to be wise or foolish. Now the second thing that we learn is the bridegroom is delayed and comes at an unforeseen time. No one knows when Jesus is coming back. Third thing is the wise ones, who are the faithful and spiritually prudent, will reap the rewards of the kingdom. The foolish ones, however, the unfaithful disciples, will suffer the consequences and punishment. Now, the fourth thing we learn is one's personal oil or faithful living cannot be transferred, and therefore we need to keep watch. The Bible actually contains 66 passages of watchfulness. Now, keeping watch ultimately means that we're thoroughly prepared for and ready for his return. Are you prepared for Jesus' return? What do you need to do today to reap the rewards in the future? If you knew exactly when Jesus was returning, say 2 Sundays from now, What would you change? I hope your answer is nothing. Now, being ready means preparing for whatever possibilities and keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus whilst we live our daily lives. This means watching your thoughts, watching your actions and your behaviors, and aligning it with God's will. We're watching for the things that are happening around the world, and we know that a lot of the signs of the end times have already passed. If you are ready for his return, it won't matter what you are doing when he comes. What matters is that whatever you are doing is in a way that we don't have to make things right when he comes. So we need to live ready, not hurry up and get ready. We won't have to worry about when he really does come back because we will always be vigilant and prepared. Now, surely we don't wish that when we meet Christ, he meets us and says, "Truly, I do not know you." The time is now. So stop putting off the things you need to be doing now. Let us all live ready and prepared for his return. Thanks for listening.